Most people believe the world runs on fairness, hard work, and good intentions. They think if you just play by the rules and treat others well, success will naturally follow. This is perhaps the most dangerous delusion of our time. The truth is far more brutal and infinitely more useful. The world is not governed by morality, it's governed by strategy, and those who understand this fundamental reality hold all the cards. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago when he wrote that men judge by appearances and results, never by methods. He knew that while the masses cling to pretty illusions about how the world should work, the truly powerful focus on how it actually works. They master the hidden game that everyone else pretends doesn't exist. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that game. We're going to explore the dark psychology secrets that separate the rulers from the ruled, the manipulators from the manipulated, the strategically superior from the hopelessly naive. This isn't about becoming evil. This is about becoming tactically sophisticated. This is about ensuring you're never again defeated by your own innocence. Because in a world where everyone else is playing chess while pretending it's checkers, you need to know the real rules. You need to master the art of strategic manipulation. The first thing you must understand is that manipulation is not inherently evil. It's a tool, like fire or electricity. It can destroy or it can create, depending on who wields it and how. Every successful leader, every influential figure, every person who has ever moved others to action has used manipulation. They just don't call it that. When Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, he wasn't just presenting a product. He was manipulating desire, creating need where none existed before, making millions of people feel incomplete without something they'd never imagined wanting. When a master negotiator gets you to say yes to their proposal, they're not relying on the strength of their argument alone. They're using psychological triggers, social pressure, and strategic timing to guide your decision. The difference between the successful and the struggling isn't that one group is more moral than the other. It's that one group understands human psychology and uses it strategically, while the other stumbles through life hoping that good intentions will be enough. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be both fox and lion. The lion uses force when necessary, but the fox uses cunning to avoid traps and outmaneuver enemies. In our modern world, the fox's skills are far more valuable than the lion's. Raw aggression is clumsy and obvious. Strategic manipulation is elegant and invisible. Think about the people in your life who always seem to get what they want. They're not necessarily the smartest or the hardest working, but they have something else. They understand how to read people, how to present their requests in irresistible ways, how to make others feel like helping them is actually helping themselves. They've learned to speak the secret language of human motivation. This language has rules, patterns, and techniques that can be studied and mastered. Once you understand these patterns, you begin to see them everywhere. You notice how advertisements manipulate your emotions, how politicians shape public opinion, how your colleagues navigate office politics. More importantly, you learn to use these same techniques to achieve your own goals. The foundation of all strategic manipulation is understanding that people are not rational actors. They like to think they are, but they're not. Every decision is filtered through layers of emotion, bias, past experience, and unconscious programming. The person who can map these hidden influences and use them strategically will always have an advantage over someone who takes people at face value. Consider how master manipulators approach a simple request. An amateur might say, "I need you to do this for me." A strategist says, "I have an opportunity that might interest you," or "I was thinking about what you said earlier, and I have an idea that could help with your situation." Same request, completely different psychology. One feels like a burden, the other feels like a gift. This is the difference between crude manipulation and strategic influence. Crude manipulation is obvious, desperate, and often backfires. Strategic influence is subtle, patient, and nearly impossible to resist because it doesn't feel like manipulation at all. It feels like natural human interaction. The second principle of strategic manipulation is that perception is more powerful than reality. Machiavelli knew this when he wrote that it's better to appear virtuous than to actually be virtuous, because people judge by what they see, not what they know. This doesn't mean you should be dishonest about everything. It means you should be strategic about how you present yourself and your ideas. Most people stumble through social and professional interactions with no awareness of how they're being perceived. They assume that if their intentions are good, others will somehow sense this and respond accordingly. This is naive in the extreme. People can only judge you by what you show them, and what you show them is entirely under your control. Master manipulators understand that every interaction is a performance, not in a fake or dishonest way, but in a strategic way. They know that the same idea can be received completely differently depending on how it's packaged, when it's presented, and who presents it. They craft their image, their timing, and their approach with the same care that a director crafts a film. This extends to something as simple as how you dress, how you speak, even how you sit in a meeting. These might seem like superficial details, but they're not. They're the raw material of perception, and perception drives behavior. The person who looks confident and competent will be treated as if they are confident and competent, regardless of their actual abilities. The person who appears uncertain and unprepared will be dismissed, even if they have the best ideas in the room. You might think this is unfair, and you'd be right, but fairness is irrelevant. This is how human psychology works, and fighting against it is like fighting against gravity. You can rage about how things should be, or you can learn how things are and use that knowledge to your advantage. The third principle is that emotional manipulation is more powerful than logical persuasion. People like to believe they make decisions based on facts and rational analysis, but neuroscience has shown us that emotion drives decision, making far more than logic ever could. The most persuasive arguments aren't the most logical ones. They're the ones that make people feel something. This is why great salespeople don't just list features and benefits. They tell stories that help you imagine how your life will be different with their product. They don't just present information. They create experiences that generate emotional responses. They understand that people buy based on how they feel, then justify with logic afterward. Political leaders have always known this. They don't win elections with policy papers and statistical analyses. They win with narratives that tap into hopes, fears, and dreams. They create emotional connections that make voters feel understood, validated, and hopeful. The facts are just supporting evidence for the emotional story they're telling. You can use this same principle in any situation where you need to influence others. Instead of just presenting your logical case, think about what emotions you want to generate. Do you want them to feel excited about an opportunity, concerned about missing out, proud to be part of something important? Once you know what emotion you're targeting, you can craft your approach accordingly. This doesn't mean being manipulative in a harmful way. It means recognizing that pure logic rarely motivates action, while emotion combined with logic is nearly irresistible. You're not tricking people into doing something against their interests. You're helping them feel the full impact of why your proposal actually serves their interests. The fourth principle is the strategic use of information. Knowledge is power, but only if you know how to deploy it. Most people either share everything they know immediately, or they hoard information without ever using it strategically. Both approaches waste the tremendous leverage that information can provide. Master manipulators treat information like a chess player treats pieces. They think several moves ahead, considering not just what information to share, but when to share it, with whom, and in what context. They understand that the same piece of information can have completely different effects, depending on the timing and presentation. Sometimes the most powerful move is to share information that makes you appear more knowledgeable or connected than others realized. Sometimes it's to withhold information that others want, creating scarcity and increasing your value. Sometimes it's to share information that helps others see you as trustworthy and reliable, building social capital for future use. This extends to how you gather information as well. Strategic manipulators are exceptional listeners, not because they're naturally empathetic, but because they understand that information is ammunition. The more you know about someone's motivations, fears, desires, and pressure points, the more effectively you can influence their behavior. They ask questions that seem casual but are actually quite strategic. They pay attention to what people don't say as much as what they do say. They notice body language, vocal patterns, and emotional reactions that reveal far more than words ever could. They treat every conversation as an intelligence-gathering operation. You might notice that truly influential people often know surprising details about the people around them. They remember personal information, they're aware of office dynamics, they understand who has real power versus who has official titles. This isn't accident or natural charisma. This is strategic information gathering in action. The fifth principle is the power of strategic silence. Most people are uncomfortable with silence and rush to fill it with words. This is a tremendous tactical error. Silence is one of the most powerful tools in the manipulator's arsenal, yet it's completely overlooked by amateurs. Silence creates pressure. When you ask a question and then remain quiet, the other person feels compelled to answer, often sharing more than they intended. When you receive an offer and pause before responding, the other party often improves their offer just to break the tension. When someone makes an unreasonable demand and you simply look at them without speaking, they frequently backtrack or explain themselves in ways that reveal their true position. Strategic silence also projects confidence and control. The person who feels the need to fill every pause with chatter appears nervous and desperate. The person who is comfortable with silence appears thoughtful and powerful. They seem like someone who chooses their words carefully, which makes those words carry more weight when they do speak. Machiavelli understood that appearing mysterious and unpredictable makes you more influential than being an open book. When people can't quite figure you out, they pay more attention to you. They try harder to gain your approval. They're more careful about how they treat you because they're not sure what you might do. This doesn't mean being antisocial or refusing to communicate. It means being strategic about when you speak and when you don't. It means understanding that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. It means recognizing that in a world where everyone is constantly talking, the person who listens strategically has an enormous advantage. The sixth principle involves understanding and exploiting social hierarchies. Every group, whether it's a family, a workplace, or a social circle, has invisible power structures that govern behavior. Most people either ignore these structures or accept their position within them passively. Strategic manipulators study these hierarchies and use them to their advantage. They identify who the real decision makers are, regardless of official titles. They understand the difference between formal authority and actual influence. They recognize alliance patterns, rivalry dynamics, and pressure points that can be leveraged to achieve their goals. More importantly, they understand how to position themselves within these hierarchies strategically. Sometimes this means aligning with the most powerful players. Sometimes it means building coalitions among the overlooked. Sometimes it means staying neutral while others fight, then stepping in when the dust settles. The key insight is that social hierarchies are not fixed. They're constantly shifting based on circumstances, relationships, and perceived value. The person who understands these dynamics can influence their own position within the hierarchy, rather than simply accepting whatever position they're assigned. This requires thinking like a political strategist, rather than just focusing on your own tasks and responsibilities. You need to understand the broader game being played, not just your small part in it. You need to see the chess board, not just your own pieces. As you develop these skills, you'll start to notice that the most successful people in any organization are rarely the ones who are best at the official job requirements. They're the ones who are best at navigating the unofficial requirements, the human dynamics that actually determine who rises and who falls. The seventh principle is the strategic management of your reputation. Your reputation is your most valuable asset, but most people manage it accidentally rather than strategically. They assume that good work will naturally lead to a good reputation, without considering how others perceive and interpret that work. Master manipulators understand that reputation is a strategic tool that must be carefully crafted and maintained. They think about how they want to be perceived, then they consistently act in ways that reinforce that perception. They understand that reputation is built through small, consistent actions over time, not through single dramatic gestures. They also understand that different audiences require different reputational strategies. How you want to be perceived by your superiors might be different from how you want to be perceived by your peers or subordinates. The reputation that serves you in one context might hurt you in another. This extends to managing negative information about yourself. Everyone has weaknesses, mistakes, and unflattering aspects of their history. The question is whether you control the narrative around these issues or whether you let others define you. Strategic manipulators get ahead of potential problems by addressing them on their own terms, rather than waiting for others to discover and weaponize them. They also understand the power of strategic vulnerability. Sharing certain weaknesses or struggles can actually enhance your reputation by making you appear more human and relatable, as long as these revelations are carefully chosen and strategically timed. The eighth principle involves mastering the art of reciprocity. Humans are hardwired to return favors and match the behavior they receive from others. This psychological principle is so powerful that it operates even when people are consciously aware of it. Strategic manipulators use reciprocity as an influence tool by strategically creating obligations and debts. This doesn't mean keeping a literal scorecard of favors. It means understanding that when you do something valuable for someone, you create a psychological debt that can be collected later. The key is being strategic about when and how you provide value, and when and how you collect on the obligations you've created. Sometimes the most powerful approach is to do favors that seem small to you but feel significant to the recipient. Sometimes it's to provide help that others can't or won't provide. Sometimes it's to offer assistance before it's asked for, creating surprise and gratitude. The timing of reciprocity is crucial. Collecting on obligations too quickly can seem transactional and manipulative. Waiting too long can allow the sense of debt to fade. Strategic manipulators develop an intuitive sense for when the time is right to call in their favors. They also understand that reciprocity works in reverse. When someone does something for you, they become psychologically invested in your success. This is why asking for small favors can actually improve relationships rather than strain them, as long as the requests are reasonable and the timing is appropriate. The ninth principle is the strategic use of contrast and framing. The same situation can be perceived completely differently depending on how it's presented and what it's compared to. Master manipulators understand that context shapes perception more powerfully than objective facts. For example, a salary offer of $60,000 seems generous if the previous offer was $40,000, but seems insulting if the previous offer was $80,000. The objective value hasn't changed, but the perception has changed dramatically based on the frame of reference. This principle can be applied to almost any situation where you need to influence perception. If you want someone to accept a proposal, you might first present a more extreme version that makes your real proposal seem reasonable by comparison. If you want to highlight your strengths, you might strategically choose contexts where those strengths are most apparent. The key insight is that people don't evaluate things in isolation. They evaluate them relative to other options, past experiences, and contextual factors. The person who controls the context often controls the decision. This extends to how you present problems and solutions. The same challenge can be framed as an insurmountable obstacle or as an exciting opportunity, depending on your strategic goals. The same mistake can be presented as a learning experience or as evidence of incompetence, depending on who benefits from each interpretation. The 10th principle involves understanding and exploiting cognitive biases. Human thinking is full of predictable errors and shortcuts that can be leveraged by those who understand them. These biases exist because they're usually helpful in daily life, but they can be strategically triggered in specific situations. For example, people tend to overvalue things they already own compared to things they don't own. This is called the endowment effect, and it can be used by getting someone to imagine owning something before they actually commit to purchasing it. People also tend to be influenced by social proof, doing what they see others doing. This can be leveraged by strategically highlighting how others have behaved in similar situations. There are dozens of these cognitive biases, and each one represents an opportunity for strategic influence. The confirmation bias makes people seek information that supports what they already believe. The anchoring bias makes people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive. The scarcity bias makes people want things more when they believe those things are in limited supply. You don't need to memorize every cognitive bias, but you should understand the general principle. People's thinking is predictably flawed in ways that can be strategically exploited. The person who understands these flaws will always have an advantage over someone who assumes that others think rationally and objectively. As you practice these techniques, you'll begin to see them everywhere. You'll notice how advertisers use scarcity to drive purchases, how politicians use fear to motivate voters, how your colleagues use social proof to build support for their ideas. More importantly, You'll learn to use these same techniques to achieve your own strategic objectives. The final principle is perhaps the most important, the necessity of strategic patience. Most people want immediate results from their influence attempts, and this impatience undermines their effectiveness. Real strategic manipulation is a long-term game that requires patience, persistence, and careful planning. Master manipulators think in months and years, not days and weeks. They understand that the most powerful influence comes from building relationships, establishing credibility, and creating systems that work automatically over time. They're willing to invest effort up front for payoffs that might not come for months or even years. This patience gives them several advantages. First, it allows them to be subtle in their approach, avoiding the desperation and obviousness that characterizes amateur manipulation attempts. Second, it allows them to build multiple influence channels simultaneously, creating redundancy and increasing their chances of success. Third, it allows them to recover from setbacks and adjust their approach based on new information. Perhaps most importantly, strategic patience allows you to maintain plausible deniability. When your influence attempts are spread out over time and mixed with genuine relationship building, it becomes nearly impossible for others to identify what you're doing. Your success appears natural and inevitable rather than calculated and manipulative. This is the hallmark of truly sophisticated strategic manipulation. It doesn't look like manipulation at all. It looks like natural charisma, lucky timing, and good relationships. The targets of your influence feel good about the decisions they make, even though those decisions serve your strategic objectives. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest victory is the one that requires no battle. In the context of strategic manipulation, this means that your most successful influence attempts will be the ones where others never realize they were influenced at all. They'll believe they came to their conclusions independently, made their own decisions freely, and acted according to their own best interests. This level of sophistication requires practice, study, and patience. It requires you to think several moves ahead, like a chess grandmaster who sees patterns and possibilities that are invisible to amateur players. It requires you to understand human psychology at a deeper level than most people ever will. But the rewards are extraordinary. When you master these principles, you gain a level of influence and control that most people can't even imagine. You become the person who gets what they want, not through force or luck, but through strategic superiority. You become dangerous in the most elegant way possible, without ever raising your voice or making threats. You join the ranks of those who understand the real game being played beneath the surface of polite society. You become someone who shapes events rather than simply responding to them. You become a master of the art that Machiavelli called the most necessary skill for anyone who wants to achieve great things in this world. The choice is yours. You can continue to stumble through life hoping that good intentions and hard work will be enough, or you can learn to play the game at the level where it's actually won. You can remain naive and vulnerable, or you can become strategically sophisticated and tactically superior. The techniques are here. The principles are clear. The only question is whether you have the intelligence to learn them and the courage to use them. Because in a world where everyone else is playing by the rules they were taught in childhood, the person who understands the real rules will always have the ultimate advantage. Remember, this isn't about becoming evil. This is about becoming effective. This is about ensuring that you're never again defeated by your own innocence or outmaneuvered by those who understand what you don't. This is about mastering the art of strategic manipulation and joining the ranks of those who truly understand how power works in the real world. The game is already being played around you every day. The only question is whether you're going to learn the rules and start winning, or continue to be a pawn in someone else's strategy. The choice, as always, is entirely yours.